Share stop video. I can't help it. I don't know what's the matter. It was working. Now it's not working. Huh. Was working. I don't know why it's not working anymore. Oh. Jeez.
Go for it. Councilmember Duffy
Hello?
will be starting soon, so please stand by.
Standing by.
Thank you.
Call the meeting to order for the February 22nd, 2022 study session. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that Councilmember Duffield is present at a teleconferencing location pursuant to Government Code Section 54953B at 4346 Sunrise Drive, Eden, Utah. So now I will be conducting roll call verbally. Councilmember O'Neill has an excused absence. Councilmember Duffield?
Yes.
Councilmember Dixon?
Yes, here.
Councilmember Brenner? Here. Councilmember Avery?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Blum?
Present.
And Mayor Muldoon.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, on to current business, and the first item is clarification on the items on the consent calendar. Do we have any requests for clarification on this at this time? Councilwoman Dixon.
I do not.
Councilwoman Brenner.
No.
Councilman Avery.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
None.
Councilman Duffield.
I have none.
And I have none as well. So moving on to Orange County Housing Finance Trust update from staff.
Hello, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Thank you for your time this afternoon. My name is Grant Henninger. I'm with the Orange County Housing Finance Trust. And I not only thank you for your time, but I thank you for your city being a member of the trust. That means a great deal to the trust and to the work that we are doing here in Orange County. The Orange County Housing Finance Trust was created about 3 years ago. We are a joint powers authority made up of the County of Orange and 23 of the 34 members or cities within the county. We are trying to get those last 11 cities, as you'll hear about in a moment. And we were created in order to help finance and develop affordable and permanent supportive housing here in Orange County. Permanent supportive housing is that housing that is really intended for the most needy here in the county. Our homeless population more than any other, and permanent supportive housing units provide services that are really needed by that population that they wouldn't get anywhere else, even in other normal affordable housing. It doesn't provide the types of services that permanent supportive housing provides. So we have a goal of creating 2,700 new permanent supportive housing units by 2025. And to reach that goal, we've done a bunch of things so far. We've had 23 members join us as members of the trust, or 23 cities join us as members of the trust. We've created a 5-year strategic plan that we're about 2.5 years into that shows how we're going to hit that 2,700 unit number. We've offered $30 million in financing to affordable housing developers. We've awarded about $20 million of that so far to 13 different projects that represent 901 new housing units here in Orange County. We've created a website that is a great tool for seeing where new affordable housing is going in Orange County. And we've been doing a lot of outreach to cities like yourself and to developers, to service providers, and to just members of the public to let them know what we're doing in order to help solve homelessness here in Orange County. As I mentioned, we've offered $30 million in funding from the trust so far. Our first year in 2020, that was about $11.5 million. Last year, about $11 million. And then just early last week, we issued our third NOFA for 2022, and that's for $10.5 million. 2 years ago, we awarded, actually both 2 years ago and last year, we awarded about $10.1 million each year to 7 and 6 projects. And hopefully this year we get about the same number of projects that we can award funding to. In addition to what we've awarded as funding, we've received a bunch of this funding from various sources, including almost $10 million from the state of California through their local housing finance trust program. And that money would not come to Orange County if it wasn't for the existence of the trust. So we are not only using resources that are already here, but we are bringing additional resources into the county that wouldn't be here otherwise. And that $10 million, about $5 million a year, goes to, about, I'm doing the math here in my head, about 150 units that we're able to build that wouldn't be built otherwise. So I mentioned that on our website, we've been tracking where we've been doing the developments, and this is kind of what that looks like. As you can see, there's been 1,176 units that are in some stage of development here in Orange County since the creation of the trust. And these are all affordable or permanent supportive housing units. And you can see where they're located in the map to the right there. Right now we don't have any in Newport Beach, but we are definitely, if the city is supportive of an affordable housing development and the developer brings it forward to us, we are more than happy to help fund it. But part of our charter is that we're not going to recommend or fund any project that a city doesn't support. And so, we are very mindful that the cities are our partners in this, and that we want to all be working together. And so, our funding sources, I mentioned some of them already, but the County of Orange has been funding us $200,000 a year for administrative expenses, $1 million a year for capital expenses. So that's part of the $10.5 million that goes out to projects every year. We've also been receiving local housing finance trust funds, about $5 million a year. 95% of that goes into capital funding, goes right around back to projects. The other 5% is used for administrative expenses. We have also received REAP funding. So that's about $300,000 a year that helps pay for administrative expenses. And all of those sources of administrative expenses means that we're not charging our member cities a single dollar to be members right now. And that's a goal that we have long term, to find other sources of funds. So you can be member cities, and especially the past couple of years, we know how tight city budgets have been. So we've been mindful of that, and we don't want to create an added burden to our member cities. So those are some of our funding sources, both for capital and administrative. And then looking to the future, I mentioned that we're going to try to get the last 11 cities to join the trust. There are, a couple of cities who wanted to see how we would do in our first couple of years. Most of the cities joined right at the beginning, including Newport Beach. And, the other cities wanted to make sure that we would be successful before they joined us. And I think we've shown that we can be successful, that we have been successful over the past couple of years. So our goal by the end of this year is to have all 34 cities in Orange County be trust members. And then we are also working to get additional funding through the state budget to come into Orange County to help build more affordable housing. As I'm sure you are aware, there's a significant surplus in the state budget right now. And last year, there was also a surplus. A couple of other regional housing finance trusts got direct allocations in the budget. We're trying to do the same for ourselves this year. And then we're also working on reaching out to companies in the community, to members of the community who might be able to donate, who would have an interest in helping build affordable housing, to try to find some private sources of funding, not just going out to the state government or the federal government or the county, to try to bring in some additional sources of funding for affordable housing throughout Orange County. So that's our goals over the next couple years, and that's all I have for you tonight. So really, I thank you for being a member of the trust. I look forward to your continued membership, and I'm here to answer any questions if you have them.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Henninger. Councilman Avery.
It's really good to see. In your view, what's your biggest challenge right now for the trust?
I would say long-term funding. The Local Housing Finance Trust program through HCD is only funded through 5 years. This is year 3. So, we expect to have another couple years of, this $5 million a year coming in. But after that, I don't know what's there. And then similarly, from the county, we're receiving Mental Health Services Act funding. That was a 5-year agreement. There's some talks that we're going to extend it by a couple years, receive additional funding through the county that way. But after that's gone, I'm unsure what comes next. So, that's one of the reasons why I talked about us trying to find other sources of funding. I think that that's our biggest challenge, honestly.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dixon.
Well, yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this update. I've been anxious to, what's your last name is? Henninger, excuse me. I was and am still a member of ACCOC, which was one of the primary sponsors of the process of creating legislation. Getting the sponsor was a long, winding road. And then to get the cities that have signed on, this was about 4 years ago. So it gives me great pleasure to see the intent of the entire creation of the Housing Trust was to create that mezzanine type funding, to put all the funding together, just so people understand, and you did a fine job explaining it, but oftentimes market rate fund, as we know through the affordable housing process, we've all been highly educated on this whole funding and financing affordable housing, but market rate financing is easy to come by. It's affordable funding is difficult, and it really is a process for a developer to put that whole funding package together, and the Housing Trust creates that holding room, if you will, for those funds as that capital comes together then to be allocated for building. And you're actually funding the financing of affordable and permanent supportive housing, and that is what you were created to do. And it's within a short time of 2 years, you've really turned this around and creating some real meeting the goals that were established. So do you think you'll get to the 2,700 housing units?
We're about halfway through, and we're about halfway to the goal, so I'm very hopeful that we do.
That's fantastic.
But it's going to be close. If we get this additional funding allocation from the state in the budget this year, absolutely. If not, it'll be close. But, I'm not sure which side of, success we're going to end up on.
On the local part of the funding, if you would mind going back to that slide. So that, to clarify, that's private funding that has been created to go into that trust. That local housing trust fund is...
No, that's state funding.
That's state funding.
Yeah, so that's coming through housing and community development through the state. So... that's $5 million through the state that we're bringing in that we wouldn't get otherwise without us.
Well, this is all a tremendous emerging success story. And are there people actually occupying? Are there any construction projects finished at this point?
Not yet. The first one should be done in the next couple months in Buena Park. It's a Jamboree housing project. It's a motel conversion where it's a Project Home Key. If you've heard of that project.
Sure.
So we're working with them there. And so they started about a year ago now already, and they should be done with construction in the next couple months and have people moving in. So that'll be our first project.
Well, congratulations, and keep doing a great job. And we're pleased to be part of something that doesn't cost us any money, but we derive great benefits to house our homeless and those in need in the county and in our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And any questions from Councilman Duffield, Utah? Okay, hearing none, let's go out to public comments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We might call you back up, but for the time being, thank you. Any public comments on this item, please come forward.
Good afternoon, I'm Nancy Gardner, and I'm here to talk about something that I've mentioned before, which is the need of a city plan for sea level rise, not just Balboa, but our coast and the entire harbor. And I know that makes some people uncomfortable because of the uncertainty. Not the uncertainty of sea level rise, that's established, but the uncertainty of how much and when. The models are all over the place as far as what's going to happen. And that is why the right plan will be so invaluable, because a good plan, the right plan, is built on triggers. If A happens, we do B. If C happens, we do D. But if C doesn't happen, we don't do D. We haven't overprotected, we haven't spent money we don't need to have. But if C does happen, we're not suddenly in a panic and going, oh, the sky is falling, or in this case, the sea is rising. It's there in our plan. Another advantage is we can anticipate through our plan. We know, for example, that the Army Corps of Engineers dredges the mouth of the Santa Ana River from time to time. Our plan would say, this is exactly where that sand should be deposited to buy us the longest term protection that we can using sediment. A plan would address maybe some issues like, should there be assessment districts around the harbor? There's a lot of privately owned property. And would it make sense to have something like what we do with undergrounding of the telephone and everything like that, power lines, to have assessment districts so that you have a uniform system of protection if it's needed for those private homeowners? Maybe no, I don't know. The other advantage of a plan is there are some very simple, holistic things that we can do now that cost nothing, I mean, really nothing, and that potentially could buy us decades of protection. So I don't think any of us want to see a seawall from the river jetty to the wedge. We could change our name if we do. We wouldn't be Newport Beach because there would be no beach. It would just be Newport. But that's not what we want. So I really urge the city to start addressing it now. I know you've got a lot on your plate. I've been there. I know that. But this is something we shouldn't keep kicking down the road. So please do think about addressing it. And if I can assist in any way, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nancy, just to be clear, was that a comment for non-agenda items?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Was I out of place?
Well, I'm not going to interrupt a former councilwoman. Great to have you. But
it shows you how knowledgeable we all are.
Right. We'll just lodge that under the non-agenda
I
item
apologize.
comments. That's okay.
I heard public comment and I jumped up.
That's okay. Thank you so much. Any comments on this study session item? Okay, seeing none, we'll come back. And Councilman Avery, did you have your name in the queue still?
Yes, I have a couple more questions on the Housing Trust. When a developer does a project, they get some financial assistance to do that.
Yes.
And then what happens with the rents?
So the rents are restricted depending on the financing sources. So the trust restricts the units that we help support to 30% of area median income. There will be other financing sources such as tax credits or tax-exempt bonds that have other restrictions that are generally 30, 50, or 60% of area median income, sometimes as high as 80%. So most of the projects that we are participating in are fully affordable. So every unit in the project has a restricted rent, but the trust only restricts a small portion of those units generally, and those are to 30%.
Great. So then the services part of it, is the trust queuing that up?
So we work with the county.
Right.
So that's done through the county healthcare agency. And part of the Mental Health Services Act funding pays for those services.
Right.
So we aren't directly doing it, but we're just helping the developer, work with the county to ensure those are, those services are provided.
Right. So then I assume that models have been generated to show a project, and probably one of the biggest challenges would be to do really and you hear this term wraparound services, but what does that really mean? How much service and, the cost of that, all those various services that the clients, will need, whether it's mental health, physical therapy,
addiction
food
support,
delivery, addiction support, the whole.
Yeah, all those things. And, honestly, I don't focus on that side
Right.
of it.
I understand.
I'm on the,
Yeah.
kind of front end side.
Right.
And so I actually don't know how those flows of money work. That those are, the pools of money that the trust is working on are construction sources. So we're helping build the buildings, and then, the county is providing the services, with the Mental Health Services Act dollars that they receive as well. So I actually, I don't know the cost of those services, unfortunately. I'm sure I can find out for you if you're.
Just trying to get a sense of how it's all, where the funding's coming from, and sort of the ongoing viability of everything, right? And to your point, there's this like 5-year horizons, it seems like, and there's ups and downs in the economy and the counties and the state's ability to send money our way and send money to this, very worthy need in Orange County. So it's still an experiment in a way, in my view.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It is. I think it's one that's working out so far.
Right.
My understanding is that through the Mental Health Services Act, that was a proposition passed, that created an additional tax. It was, one of those, millionaires taxes, type things. So I think that there will be a long-term funding stream there, for the services portion. I don't know if there will be a long-term funding stream for additional, units to be built, for the construction portion
Right.
of it
Right.
that, the trust deals with.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilman Brenner.
Could you pull up the map where it shows the units that have already been developed? Is that who has access to that?
Did I go the wrong way?
I'll,
I did.
While you're getting
Okay.
there, I'll start my question. But so most of them are Northern Orange County or Inland Orange County, and that's obviously because of the cost of land in those places, I would imagine. But what happens when we have a couple of permanent supportive housing developers that we have identified that would like to do projects in Newport, but they're having trouble finding land. And so how would that be helpful to work with you in that regard? And the other part of that question is if we had local citizens who wanted to help fund the purchase of land for a project in our city, would that be something that they would go through you to do? Or it's hard to see how these things happen where land is as expensive as it is in Newport Beach.
Sure. Yeah, I think land is definitely one of the big hurdles, throughout Orange County. That's not just, limited to South County or to Coastal County it's expensive everywhere. And, I know one thing that a number of cities have been doing, especially, cities that used to have large redevelopment agencies such as Anaheim, they're going out and they're purchasing land. And, they have found some clever ways to finance that. So that's one way to do it, to kind of use the power of the city to, acquire that land. I certainly think that, if there are residents that are interested in donating in order to help, fund the purchase of land, we would be happy to talk to them. I mean, obviously, that's something, we have a board that, we would have to go get that approved by and everything. But I think that's something, that our board has approved us receiving donations. We haven't talked about, how those donations can be restricted yet. So I am sure that they would be open to that discussion at least.
Well, from what you said about Anaheim, if cities are purchasing the properties for these, then it might be something that would come through our city where we would actually purchase the land for something like this. But we've got to be looking at all of those creative solutions because it's just very difficult to find the properties to do these things.
It certainly is. And, honestly, I think historically one of the biggest challenges for affordable housing developments of all type in the southern part of Orange County has been that those projects haven't scored well for tax credits. And, one of the things, if you look at what projects need in order to be competitive for tax credits, they need to be close to hospitals or medical centers. They need to be close to transit, to buses or trains. They need to be close to grocery stores, like within walking distance, so somebody can live there without a car. And, that's just not how most of the southern half of Orange County has been designed. And so those haven't been real competitive historically. Those requirements are changing slightly. The state government has looked at it and said, as you see on the map here, we're getting a lot of, a concentration of affordable housing developments in city centers. Here in Orange County, that means Anaheim and Santa Ana. Mm-hmm. And, we're not getting it in a lot of other places. And, there's an equity issue that the state has identified. So they're starting to look at, how do you get affordable housing developments in places that historically they haven't gone. So we can spread them out a little bit, and we don't have, certain areas of, any of our counties or cities that, get a disproportionate, burden placed on them, by having these, developments.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is an update on crime statistics in the city. Chief?
Good afternoon, Mayor Muldoon, Council. I'm John Lewis, your police chief, and I'm here with Deputy Chief Cartwright and a few more members of my team, our crime analyst, Christy Kondo, and Deputy Chief Steve Rasmussen of our Patrol and Traffic Division. So what I have here prepared today, it's a number of slides. I promise it won't be a death by PowerPoint, and I will go through them quickly to give you an overall idea of where we were for the year 2021 and some of the challenges that we're anticipating and some of the trends that are impacting our city in terms of crime as we go forward here. So first off, and this is just for a point of reference, and I know that when you've heard me talk in the past, I've given you these definitions, but we talk about Part 1 crimes is what we're going to be talking about today, and these are, in essence, the serious crimes that our agency, along with every other agency in the nation, contributes to the FBI and tracking crime statistics across the nation. It's a uniform crime report, same offenses that are reported, same definitions to give us a picture of crime in the country. So we contribute to that, and those are specifically what we'll be talking today. Those are some examples of Part 1 crimes here, but largely these are the serious crimes in the city that we track and report to the FBI. So in 2021 here, over to the right slide here is our Part 1 crime, and we finished overall with a decrease of almost 9%. Actual 172 crimes were reported less this year than were in 2020. And we track with these numbers across 5 years. We're 70% down across the 5-year average. And we also trust and report our arrest statistics, which are going to be our felony and misdemeanor arrests. And we saw an increase there of about 12% overall physical arrests made in the city in 2021. There's a couple categories that I want to talk about here. Violent crime, I always want to talk about violent crime. These are going to be the most serious ones. Unfortunately, in this city, we are not impacted by violent crime in the way that some other jurisdictions, even in this county, are. These are what the aggregate numbers are here for our robberies. And I'll break down robbery statistics a little bit in more detail as we go forward. We had 22 reported last year, which was actually down almost 48%. Our aggravated assaults were up a little bit. About 12% for 64 total. And then our complete crime picture for violent crimes was 122 crimes total, which was a slight decrease, 4% from last year. I listed these property crime numbers here because these are the ones that we saw increases in over 2021, and we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about what those look like and what we're doing to impact those. Residential burglary has been a challenge for us, will continue to be a challenge for us. Residential burglary, when we talk about Part 1 crimes, we're going to talk about these statistics, and it almost sounds a bit clinical, but bike theft is also a Part 1 crime. I mean, Part 1 crimes are not created equal. So residential burglaries are ones that we specifically emphasize. Anybody that's been a victim of a residential burglary knows how what kind of violation that is related to the sanctity of your home, and we spend significant effort in combating people that are going to target our homes in the city. Auto theft is another one that we've seen. This is also something regionally where there's been increases as well. But our total property crime for the year ended up being down a net 9% with that number there of 1,662. I'll move on to our violent crime comparison here. We had 2 homicides this year, and that's about average for us. We had 1 last year, so that's right where we have consistently seen our homicide numbers. And you remember a couple of these. One was a incident that had happened down a pier. It was a fight that had ended up resulting in a death. And then also the second one was a shooting that we had that ended up being a justifiable homicide over on in the Vista Bahia Street over on, I think we're all familiar with that case. So those were those 2 homicides were. When you look at our numbers here, we were the most impacted by aggravated assault, which I'll break that down a little bit too, but it makes sense too. A lot of our aggravated assaults, we have domestic issues that are tracked in aggravated assaults, but this is also something that we see alcohol related and sometimes related to our alcohol serving establishments, which in 2021, when we're comparing numbers, we're looking at numbers that are a little bit increased from what we saw in 2020 because a lot of those locations were shut down and capacity obviously significantly limited. And then you look at our robbery numbers there, those are, that's a 22 versus 42 the year before. And then when you look at our rapes, we had a few more, 34 total rapes reported, but when we're looking at the 27 from 2020, that was one off of a 5-year low. So that was a pretty low number that we were dealing with. Here's robberies, and this is what I want to give you a picture of what robberies, and this is important to understand too in this city. I think that you hear the word robbery, and it's a strong word, and it conjures up, the idea of a weapon involved, a gun, those types of things, and these are very, very serious crimes. And we have had those, unfortunately, in our city. The majority of these are broken down the way this pie graph shows. 50% are strong arm robberies, and strong arm robberies are ones that there may be a weapon involved, but it's not. It's a threat of force is in essence what a strong arm robbery is. Those are the majority of the ones that we have without necessarily a weapon seen. And then when we do have weapons used, they are a knife in 3 occasions, firearm in 3 occasions, and then others. And you can imagine there's different types of weapons that could be used to affect a robbery. Commercial robberies, if you look at those are a small percent. Commercial robberies, these are going to be the liquor store, 7-Eleven, bank robberies. Those numbers are reflected there as well. And then 23%, which is, almost a quarter of our robberies are what we refer to as Estes robberies. And I put those up there as a definition. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but an Estes robbery in real lay terms is it's a shoplift that went wrong. Estes is a case that classified a shoplift that is essence interrupted and there's some force, whether it's a security guard or somebody in the store tries to stop this shoplift from occurring. There's a use of force. It's classified as a robbery. So an Estes robbery, these are all serious cases, but an Estes robbery is more like a shoplift than it is like what you would think is a traditional robbery. But I think it's important to point out here as well that almost 60% of these robbery cases that have reported ended up resulting in physical arrests. Aggravated assaults that I mentioned here. In 2021, we were up in aggravated assaults, and again, that makes sense with the traffic that we saw, our establishments opening again, alcohol related. Most of our aggravated assaults are fights related with alcohol. A high number of arrests in these, 64% of these resulted in physical arrests. And then we did have our domestic violence cases as well, but that's a smaller picture of what our aggravated assault numbers are with only 22% there. Property crime I'm going to spend a little bit of time on because this is the one that is the most impactful for us in terms of our Part 1 crime numbers. So when you look here, the biggest numbers that we have, and it really comes as no surprise, are going to be our burglary, theft from auto, and our theft larceny cases there. And you can see by the bars there. Property crime overall was down, as I mentioned before, 9.1% across the city, and most of that was reflected in our theft larceny numbers there. You can see going down from 636 from 747 in 2020. So that was the largest decrease was there.
Chief.
At those theft numbers.
Sometimes the perception is that property crime is up, and I've heard that's because of Nextdoor, social media, raising awareness of crimes. What are your thoughts?
That's a great question, and it's kind of a double-edged sword with Nextdoor and some of these other communications thing, and and even us as the police department, we message a lot on property crime. We send out the nixels that we all get. We're always talking about it in community meetings, and I think there's a heightened awareness to property crime, which is on one hand is a good thing because people are, it's in the back of their mind and they think to call us if there's something wrong, or and I'll show you some more numbers here too where I think our residents could help us a little bit more in terms of property crime. But there's certainly a heightened awareness. I think people are more tuned in to this to these types of crimes now than they have been. Again, part of that's some of our messaging as well that's contributing to it. But I have heard that the numbers in our city don't bear that perception out, but it's definitely one that I've heard.
Tom Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. On that subject, now these are 2021 versus compared to 2020. What are we seeing in 2022?
So far, we came in January with a 1.9% decrease. This January over January of last year. So the trend is staying in that direction. And again, it's hard to really estimate what things are going to look like within the first couple months of the year because it's really small numbers that we're talking about after. But so far this year, as of January, came in with a 1.9% decrease.
Are these reports or are these arrests?
So these are reports. These are just Part 1 crimes. I have a slide on arrests as well.
So does this mean it's above $950 in value?
Theft larceny is a category that there's a breakdown. It's not just grand theft and petty theft. Under that theft larceny category, we have bike theft, boat theft, mail theft, pickpocket, shoplift, grand, and petty theft. So it's an aggregate category that we categorize a number of theft crimes specifically for UCR reporting.
Do we have any data when you are confronting a theft, retail theft, property theft, that we cannot arrest because it's less than $950 according to state law?
Well, I'll tell you our philosophy on physical arrests. And the reality is I think there are many other jurisdictions, right, that are using cite and release quite liberally. And I think that is because there is not going to necessarily be a significant penalty behind that. So I've heard of agencies, and I know of agencies that say, hey, look, we're not going to take physical custody of these people because we think that ultimately it's not going to result in much of a court process. We have not changed our profile on this, and what sentencing happens later on related to these crimes is certainly a matter for the courts. And our philosophy is that if you commit a crime in Newport Beach and an arrest is appropriate, then we're going to take physical custody and arrest you and book you in our jail and transport you to county jail as necessary. So we have not changed in terms of our approach to that. Even though now that there are some crimes that were previous felonies that have now been knocked down to misdemeanors that allow you to cite and release.
So I was talking to Deputy, what is your position now, Joe? Deputy. And we chatted about this recently, and just to further your comment, just for the public communication, if Deputy would like to speak to the perception in Newport Beach. And first of all, I want to just back up. And on Nextdoor or Nixle, when there was must have been Nixle yesterday, that's a description of 2 home invasions, and you arrested. The good news, you arrested them. I think there were 4 people, 4 suspects, and I think 2 were from Central California. And would you like to just, if you wouldn't mind, talk about how we are approaching this? Because in other cities, just as the chief said, other cities are issuing citations where we are arresting, and I think, I'm speculating, is it sending a message to these people who are coming from outside of Orange County and coming here from other parts or wherever they're coming from, realizing that Newport Beach is enforcing our laws? Do
Yes,
you want to
ma'am.
just comment on that, please?
Yes, and that has happened in the region, and that has a lot to do with Prop 47 and 57 AB 109, which lessened some of the crimes the chief referred to from felonies to misdemeanors, which then predicated some offices and some agencies to go ahead and issue citations for those that they knew were not going to go anywhere as far as they were concerned. But we have not changed that philosophy at all. As the chief stated, if we have somebody that has committed a crime, misdemeanor, felony, what have you, we will arrest them, and regardless of where they live, we will go find them. That has been our philosophy in some of our cases. Misdemeanor theft, less than $950. Our detectives has gone as far as Fresno, Hesperia. I mean, they've gone way out of their way to get people, and to the point where some suspects have even been shocked that they came out for that crime. They were like, really? You came all the way out here for that? I mean, they remembered stealing that in Newport, and they were surprised that they were pursued all the way to their home in Fresno.
Well, obviously, we're very pleased to see that we are enforcing our laws and notwithstanding the lessening of those laws from the state level, but I appreciate that. So thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
We all support making their life a little tougher to commit crimes in Newport. Councilwoman Brenner.
Yes. John, we kind of interrupted you midstream, so I don't know if you're going to cover this down the way, but one thing I wanted to make sure we talked about was Eric Little spoke to Colonel Lamar Residents Association last week, and he was talking about the South American gangs that we had intercepted and some real success stories. He had everyone cheering at the meeting. So will you cover those?
We will. You're way ahead of me.
Okay, well,
So,
then let you get to it then.
I'll get to it quickly. How about
Okay.
that? We'll talk about, and this is a property crime here, just a little bit more in detail to give you an idea of what the numbers look like in these specific areas that we're trying to impact. Our auto thefts were up almost 9%. Again, that's something that's happening across the region as well. Our burglary theft auto, we talked about that, is down a little bit, but our residential burglaries, to your point, Councilmember Brenner, were up. That's 17.2%. I'm going to talk a little bit about those theft groups and what we're doing to impact them. This is where the messaging becomes important. So again, it's kind of a double-edged sword where we're saying, gosh, you know what? While the numbers are telling us that our crime picture as of 2021 is better than it has ever been from a numerical standpoint in the city's history. These are record lows that we're seeing here. But again, the messaging again with the perception that there may be more crime out there is because this is what we're trying to impact here. When you look at burglary theft from auto, 50% were of these vehicles were either left unlocked or unsecured. So if we can get people to lock their doors, and this is a safe community, people feel safe here. They're not always necessarily paying attention to locking their cars, and this is something we've consistently been messaging on for many years. But again, unfortunately, the numbers tell us again that half of these cars that are victims of theft here were unlocked. Auto theft, 35% were unlocked, or the victim's key was used, and that's that. And part of that is now too. A lot of people will just with the car remotes that we have now, will just push the button and leave them in their car, and that's something that we've seen consistently. And again, it's part of technology being a convenience here. On the other hand, it's causing our auto theft numbers to rise. And a lot of times, crooks will get in cars maybe if they thought that they were just going to steal something out of the glove box or whatever, but then they push the button and the car starts up. So it's almost become a crime of opportunity in many cases. And our garage burglaries, again, almost 60% were unsecured. This is our arrest data, and this is what we track here. And you can see the numbers here. No surprise, in 2020 we were down on our arrest, and we've started to see it trend right back up again in 2021, and we're on pace, I think, to exceed what we've seen so far in 2021 as well. People are surprised to know that on average in Newport Beach historically we physical arrest about 3,500 people a year, and you can see that from the numbers. Again, 2020 was a down year, but we're moving back to where we need to be as far as arrests. 11.8% up compared to 2020, but a little bit down, almost 9% on the 5-year average.
Thank you. Councilwoman Dixon.
Just a quick question. Could you just edify arrests? You cited 3,000 arrests. That's significant. How many crimes, kind of juxtapose how many crimes have been committed versus how many arrests? What percentage of the crimes committed do we make an arrest?
We don't track that necessarily because arrests aren't necessarily dependent on crime. Let's say we make an arrest for, DUI, right? That was something that we would see, and there's not necessarily a crime per se to go along with it. I mean, so we can make an arrest and not necessarily have a reported crime to go along with it. I mean, if it's a proactive arrest, let's say if I stop somebody and they have narcotics in their possession or they have stolen property in their possession, that stolen property, there's a victim here, it's a crime, it's the state of California, but maybe that property was stolen from another jurisdiction, so it wouldn't necessarily be reflected in our crime numbers. So the arrests we just track as an aggregate number of total how many physical arrests come through our jail in a year.
Well, and that's a lot. I mean, could one speculate that there maybe are more crimes that are committed in Newport Beach, but we can't arrest them or have not arrested them or we miss them? I mean, you can't get 100% of the crime committed, I guess. It's like you can't, well, let me ask specifically too. I've read about Prop 47 and the limitations or the consequences of Prop 47, the law that was created. And I did not know this until I recently read that, and correct me if I'm wrong of how I understand this, that a police officer must witness the crime that's being committed. So how has Proposition 47, the new law, or not so new anymore, changed how you enforce and arrest a crime?
So, like the deputy chief was mentioning, for us here in Newport Beach, again, like when we're talking about these misdemeanor arrests here, we're still making them. And these, what it impacted is, let's just use, for example, you have, possession of methamphetamine was previous a felony. It would carry a $10,000 bail with it. It is not anymore, right? So what you'll see in other jurisdictions is those types of felony arrests just not being made, and there's a citation that's issued. Okay, so we have not changed the way that we take people to jail in the city, regardless of whether or not the crime is a misdemeanor or a felony. Now, in terms of crimes that are necessarily reported and we don't make an arrest, I mean, that's possible. I mean, if we don't have leads on a case, I mean, there's not anything there for us to work, then sure, I mean, those could be unsolved, and we track our clearance rates, because every time that we report a crime, either we make an arrest in the field, we identify a suspect, we create a preliminary investigation, and then it goes to our investigators, and then fingerprints, DNA, whatever it's going to be, they will follow up from there, and then we could make an arrest later on based on.
But there's nothing in state law and current state law that prevents you from doing the enforcement.
No, there's nothing that prevents us from doing enforcement. What it has done has changed discretion in terms of how people are, how agencies are handling these types of issues. And again, we maintain a high enforcement profile related to crime in the city.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilman Avery.
Yeah, Chief, are we sort of on a percentage basis on par for crimes with Laguna Beach, percentage based on population?
So that's a good question too, is whether or not what does our crimes look like compared to our neighbors, and I don't want to. Every city's different.
Right.
We're different too because of the amount of people that we see in terms of visitor volume compared to like a city like a Fountain Valley.
Right.
But I can tell you right now, I mean, so we're coming in at 1,700 crimes, Part 1 crimes, 1,800 Part 1 crimes in a year. That is significantly low, and I can tell you that not all of the crime information UCR reporting has been done yet for this year in the county, but I can tell you that Irvine is up, Huntington Beach is up. Now, Laguna Beach, I'm not sure what their numbers are. You have a city like Costa Mesa. Costa Mesa typically has more crime reported in Costa Mesa every year than we do. Typically by, Christine, probably about 1,000 more crimes a year. Does that sound right? Which is a lot. So it depends on the city. It depends on the issues that are facing that city. But for a city our size, with the issues that we deal with here, these numbers are pretty remarkable. They're low.
I think so, considering the cycles of folks into the city, especially in the summertime, but all the time.
And what we end up seeing a lot of times too is we have types of crimes that are specifically directed at resort communities. I mean, these are the ones where if you live in, I don't know, the city of Orange, you don't have to worry about your backpack being stolen on the beach. When people are out, not necessarily attending to their property. The types of things that we see in our nightclubs and things like that, where unattended purses and things like that are victimized. It's just there are certain things about having a large visitor volume that impact our crime numbers that are probably a little bit different than some other cities.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Ms. Brenner, we're going to talk about South American theft groups now.
I don't know if I'm going to get the applause you're talking about, but I'll try to remember the story he told. Maybe you can remind me. There have been quite a few. Moving on, I'm going to cover, I'm Deputy Chief Joe Cartwright. It's a pleasure to speak to you tonight. I'm going to be talking about South American theft groups, which is responsible for part of that residential burglary. Some of the other thefts, commercial burglary, burglary from auto, but also primarily residential burglaries, which we talked about as being a very close to home personal thing for a lot of people to be violated in that fashion. What's important to realize is this goes back a number of decades, and this is not just a Newport Beach problem. This is a regional problem, a national problem, and even a global problem. This is hitting areas in North America, India, Britain, and Australia. As far as cities go, it's the affluent cities that typically have people with a little bit nicer cars and amenities and things of that nature. Newport Beach, Beverly Hills, Atherton up in near Silicon Valley. Higher price targets. Their MO is to hit high-end homes, usually entering through the rear of the home, rear windows, rear sliders that are unlocked or that they can break through. Climbing up to balconies that maybe not having an alarm on them near the master bedroom. That's the primary target, the master bedroom, and they're usually looking for jewelry and guns and things of that nature, very high value targets. And this goes all the way back to the 90s, where Colombian South American theft groups would target jewelry salesmen and women who were traveling or doing jewelry shows. Over time, that has morphed into residential burglary profile, including some Chilean groups, which we have been in contact with and made arrests on. This is groups that train overseas on how to hit these homes, and then they'll enter the U.S. on tourist visas. And it's usually 3 or 4 suspects, and again, targeting the master bedroom. In some cases, we've arrested them, and some would refuse to identify themselves, so we would call some of our federal partners that we've worked closely with, and they will bring a fingerprint scanner down, and we will find out that they entered a port of entry into the U.S., and we will get their identification through our federal partners. We're also working with a number of task forces and groups locally. Ventura County and LA County have task force for South American theft groups that are specifically, that's their only job, is this particular group. Some of the recommendations we make for our residents is to secure jewelry and items of high-end, high value in safe deposit boxes if possible. And to make sure that it always looks like your home. That's the primary way that they'll move along golf courses in greenbelt or hillside areas, and they'll watch a home for a number of hours to see if there's anybody there. Once they see that the home appears to be vacant, or no movement, or no lighting coming on or off, or music coming on or off, they'll go ahead and proceed up the hill and ransack the home for some of those items. As you can see on the slide here, the Washington Post was interviewing one of the FBI task force members, and he was quoted as saying they represent an enormous threat right now in our country, and they are tending to thread the needle in avoiding both state and federal prosecution. And this has to do with the way that they're evasive and evade capture, and they try not to get any cases filed on them. Of course, with California, as Councilwoman Dixon pointed out, they're trying to take advantage of some of those laws where they can get, they're a first-time offender as far as we can tell in the state of California, and they will come in for their bail hearing and try to get released on bail so they can try to go ahead and escape. Luckily, we keep close relationships with our federal partners and try to get them flagged so we can keep them in the area so that they can go ahead and face responsibility for these crimes. They've hit a number of cities around us as well. So this is something that we've been on the lookout for and continue to work closely with our regional partners in order to address that. All right, anything further, sir? Any questions on the South American theft group?
Very interesting.
I think what caused the applause was we had a couple of cases recently in the last couple of weeks where they have actually apprehended people that are part of these South American gangs, and I think he was telling the story about how it came to be that we actually intercepted them and were able to apprehend these suspects.
Yeah, I'm aware of a few myself. I think the one maybe Lieutenant Little might have been talking about was a home where the homeowners were not there, but their video was operating. And they had some of, I don't know which company it was, and I don't want to give an advertisement, but they were able to get an emotion alarm on their phone and were able to see that there were suspects inside their home. And of course, they will call us, and our officers are very, very adept to situations like that. They practice every night on how to basically move into an area, set up a wide perimeter, and start to bring it closer and closer to the impacted home. In this particular case, if I'm correct, this is the one where they watched them in the home. As the officers were arriving, they knew exactly what they looked like, where they were going, and were able to quickly apprehend all four of them. And they tried hiding in bushes and things of that nature, but that's with helicopters and the number of team members we have in the region, this is not possible to get out once we cinch that perimeter around you. So,
Yes, that was one of the stories where the homeowner was on vacation and
Right.
notified the police department. That was exciting. So I have one other, are you finished with your presentation yet, John?
We've got one more slide.
You keep going, because I have a question that may not be related to what's on your.
So I'll just to follow up on what Deputy Chief was talking about with these groups, and what was particularly frustrating about them is these people will not, in many cases, have they're foreign nationals. They won't have a criminal record, and it's and they're released from jail very quickly, and then they're back in their home country. And so now we're dealing with there was many times. In this city, in cases that I've worked over the years, we would have a burglary crew or maybe a skilled burglar or two that were these career criminal types that would work areas like Newport Beach or Beverly Hills, and you would be able to arrest this individual, put a case together, and then you'd be able to impact these numbers right away. What ends up happening with this is we can go arrest 5 of them, and then there's 5 more at the same type of crime impacting our neighborhoods within days of each other. So that's why this one is persistent again, across the country right now. And it's something that we're tracking, obviously at our level locally, but working with the feds as well. And then I also, while we talk about, in terms of like national trends, what we're dealing with, I also want to talk a little bit more locally about some of the things that are still persistent around here that we're dealing with. And these are some of the ones I think, Councilmember Dixon, you probably had mentioned too, some of these out of the area crews that are targeting us as well. So I asked Deputy Chief Rasmussen to talk about these issues that we've been seeing here with the regional theft groups.
Mayor Muldoon and members of the council, I just wanted to briefly touch on patrol's efforts with regard to regional theft groups. As we were mentioning with the South American theft groups, with the regional theft groups, these are either organized gangs or loosely affiliated career criminals that will come into the area, typically multiple individuals in a vehicle or multiple vehicles. We've seen this on the news with retail theft. We've seen a lot of that on the news where there's large groups will come into an area and target retail establishments. But we've also seen on the residential side where we did see an increase in residential burglary this year. I think some of those anecdotally are due to the fact that most residential burglary occurs when a home is unoccupied, and that is the intent of most burglars. They want to come in, take property, and then leave. So they're going to target typically during the day when people are away at work, or they'll be staked out down the street and looking for people leaving for dinner, and they'll target that residence as the residents leave. So with COVID, we had a lot of people working from home and being at home, and so we did see a decrease in residential burglary because most people were at home. And as people are getting back to work, we're starting to see that increase in residential burglary. So just to pass along, the patrol division is very proactive. We know what we're looking for when we're out there, vehicles that are occupied by multiple people, driving slowly through the area, looking for those opportunities. And some of that also fits into vehicle burglary. But either way, what we'd like residents to just keep an eye out on vehicles that are unfamiliar to the area, multiple people in those vehicles and driving slowly, or parked at the end of the street, unfamiliar. Those are things we're looking for as far as residents calling us so we can be in there. We're obviously out there patrolling for those type of individuals, but we also need help from the community. On the retail side, vehicles that are idled at the curb in front of shopping centers that are occupied, those are the type of things we're looking for too. So any residents that see anything that's suspicious, we request they give us a call. This is a perfect example. I know Councilmember Dixon had mentioned it. These are individuals that were observed leaving a non-occupied dwelling in the port streets. This vehicle, or this residence, was tinted for fumigation, so they knew that it was not occupied, went in, stole property, and then left the area. We were able to take all 8 in custody. They came in 2 vehicles, and primarily from LA County, but there were some from the Central Valley as well. So great success there in getting all 8 into custody.
Councilwoman Dixon.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. On when you make these arrests and go to Fresno and arrest these suspects, what is the bail situation? Do they get out? Is there no bail on some of these property-related crimes?
Well, it's going to depend. I mean, if you have a lot of the ones that we're dealing with, and particularly with the career criminals. I mean, if we have someone with a parole violation or something like that, then that could be a situation where we're looking at bail enhancements or revocations. But the way the bail system has changed now too, many times these individuals will be released quite quickly from our custody. That's just the way the laws work now. So. Notwithstanding, if we will still make those efforts to arrest people, and typically if we're going to go somewhere, as far as away, like into Northern California, it's going to be a good case. But there's a lot of agencies that aren't doing those, even with property crimes right now, because what we're seeing in the courts right now, the penalties are just not as substantial as they used to be.
Well, what about with the South American type crimes? And so they're non-citizens; they don't have any identification. Are they released immediately on bail because they don't have a prior record?
They could be. They could be. So in many of these cases, we'll have we'll take custody of them, and sometimes they're out before our officers can finish writing their reports. So it's significantly frustrating from that regard. But I also think that it's worth the effort, because many times if we're able to disrupt these groups, and if it's not that they're getting significant jail time, but we're disrupting their operations, whether it's in making them unsuccessful here in this city, then we're going to continue to do it. And that's why I think we've seen these numbers trend the way that we have. I mean, we're still going to be fighting this, and it really is an uphill battle just based on the way the legislation has changed for us. But we're still giving it that effort because we believe that we can be effective here with these tactics in Newport Beach.
Well, you are demonstrating that. Let me just follow up on the fumigation. I've seen at least 2 reports that come over on Nixle in the last few weeks. Is this a new thing, as to enter a property that is tented? I mean, do they wear gas masks or something? What are they doing?
So there's different ways to do it. If you know what you're doing, you will be able to determine whether or not it's safe to access one of these residences. And what we always remind people too is, if you're going to do that, make sure that you have your valuables out of your house and secured. And many times folks will not do that, and these crooks know that. So they're able to determine the ones that are a little bit more sophisticated are able to determine when it's safe to be able to get in and access the house.
Well, they just, like at the 3rd day or something like that, when they think it's been turned off. One more question on smash and grab. We had an incident recently at Fashion Island. Do we have any more of those incidents?
No, we haven't. That one is, and we're going to continue to work on that one. And I anticipate that we may have some resolution to that here coming soon. I just don't have information for it available to you tonight. But as soon as I do, I'll provide it to you.
Well, we're very fortunate to have such an outstanding police department in Newport Beach, and going against the tide of increased crime and what you're dealing with and finding creative ways to still enforce our laws. I'm grateful, so thank you.
Councilman Brenner?
Okay, we're to the questions part now, so I can ask my question. So, one of my questions was not really related to the burglaries as much, but we're getting a lot of complaints from people about the homeless that we're not enforcing our no camping laws and that we're not forcing them to move on. And I know we've had reasons where our shelter was filled and we didn't have our mental health task force working yet and trained yet and everything. But what do you see in the future as we have those resources more available to us as far as our ability to actually force homeless people to move on or go for treatment or whatever?
I'm optimistic. I really am about where we're at, and it's been an uphill, fight. I mean, from all of us, and I know with the support of this council, we've got some things in place right now that I think are that are innovative. Be Well is just rolled out this week again. This has potential to help us with not just homelessness, but with some of these other crime numbers here, whether it's, mental health affects a lot of things and it is associated with crime in many different ways. And so I think by having this program out here, it is going to help us out significantly. I think that we've seen significant improvement with our partnerships across the county and finding resources for these individuals, because at the end of the day, we can arrest them, and we do. When and a lot of these things are going to be your low-level types of offenses. They're addiction related, they're alcohol related, those types of things. But the reality is there's just not much in terms of penalties that go behind it. So you're doing this thing where you're arresting somebody and they're out 5 minutes later and they're right back on the same old street corner doing the thing again. So that's part of how we address these things, because we're not going to look the other way. I don't care what crime it is, right? Whether or not your status of residency is, all right, we're going to be firm but fair and impartially enforce our laws here in the city. And so that being said, we know that there are some people that we need to get them up off the street, frankly. And so we have a lot of things in place now that it's taken, years now, right, to get into place. And I'm optimistic with the approach that we're taking right now that we're going to see some improvement this year. And I sincerely believe that.
That would be so exciting. One more thing I wanted to mention was that I believe at our meeting the other day, someone asked Eric again about the loud and the racing cars, and people are really hesitant to call the police unless they really think they're supposed to, and I think it's because we know all the important things that you guys are doing, and we want you to focus on the South American gangs and that sort of thing. But he emphasized again for people to call the non-emergency number about these vehicles that are racing and loud. And can you assure, I guess it's up to you guys to figure out what's important enough to address at a certain time depending on what's happening in the neighborhood.
So what we've done with that, and I always tell folks, and I'm sure many of you heard me say it, just give us the opportunity. Just give us the opportunity, and we'll figure out. Look, if we're if we've got 8 people involved in a residential burglary that just occurred, and we're busy with that, it's going to be difficult for us to break people off instantaneously to maybe deal with a speeding motorcycle on Pacific Coast Highway. But you as a resident aren't necessarily going to know that, and you're not expected to know that one way or another. Just call us, let us know about it, and we respond to we're a full service police department. We respond to any and everything that our folks call about. And I think that's something that I'm personally proud of, that we do that. We still respond to non-injury traffic collisions. We still respond to service requests that a lot of jurisdictions have moved away from. We haven't. So I just, I encourage people to call, and I know how it is too. There's, people don't necessarily want to bother us, but it's okay. We have people that can answer the phone. But that being said, when it comes to traffic, we're well aware of the quality of life issues that specifically related to these vehicles that we've been dealing with over the past couple of years. We continue to work in task force with our partners up and down in our beach cities that are being impacted, and we continue to make enforcement campaigns specifically on this issue. And it's one that we've that it's moving in the right direction, but it's persistent. Again, it's part of being in a beach community. You will have people that will engage in this type of activity down here, unfortunately. So it's something we have to, for lack of a better term, keep our foot on the gas as we're going forward. And we haven't let up on that either. We also have some grant enforcement operations and things like that we do specifically related to traffic and traffic quality of life issues.
One last thing is, I know we have signs up all around town telling our emergency personnel how much we appreciate them, but do you feel like our police department recognizes how appreciated they are in our community?
I do. And I think that, you know, sometimes it takes times where they're the tough times, you know, for you to maybe recognize that. But I can tell you, I can speak for me personally. I mean, just the outpouring of love and support for this police department over these past couple of years is it's humbling, frankly. And so I know that our officers feel that way. And typically the ones that are supporters aren't necessarily the ones that we're interacting with on a daily basis, right? I mean, you know, they're not necessarily the ones that are reflected in these arrest numbers here. And so, but yeah, we've had some just incredibly nice things, and generous people have done some pretty amazing things for this police department. So we're very, very fortunate to be able to work here in the city and receive the support that we do.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the entire police force. I think it's hard pressed to find a force that is so loved by the people, who's bringing crime rates down as arrests are going up, and is able to accomplish so much. And I think in the not too distant future or past, we've had a couple of serious incidences we've had to deal with here. And, you know, we've performed so exemplary. And I think it's something to really be proud of, that we're ready, we're doing what's right by the citizens, and we're also keeping the stats pretty much the opposite of the rest of the country. And so, you know, we're so privileged to get here, or to be able to live here, and I think, you know, the relationship we have with you guys is just second to none. So thank you guys for everything you do.
Yes, thank you. Any comments from the public, please come forward now.
Greetings, distinguished council, police and city staff. This is not about the crime report. Can I continue?
Is it related to crime at all?
Non-agenda item.
So, okay, that will be in about 2 minutes. Thank you. Any comments to this specific item? Okay, seeing none, I don't see any requests to comment. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you. Okay, now is the time for public comments on agenda and non-agenda items. Actually, on that last item, anyone in Utah want to speak? Okay, hearing nothing. Okay, can't forget about Councilman Duffield. Thank you. Okay, please come forward if you'd like to speak on agenda or non-agenda items. So that is your time.
Again, thank you for having a few moments. I hope not to take your full time. Everyone here looks well rested, even though we're 1 hour or so into everything here, and great to see that. I want to actually prompt the council, for those that may or may not remember, back in November of 2020, I wasn't here, there was a large project approved, and it is something that benefits the community at large, and it involved, quote, some night work. I'm here to tell you that nightly I have a serenade I'll spare your ears. That's 90 decibel saw blade, continuing with lights, flashing beeps, jackhammers, and diesel engines moving around. So apparently there's a large water project on the corner of Jamboree and PCH. Just so happens to be my backyard. There's only a few of us affected. That's the good news. And but unfortunately, now that we're that started on February 13th, Sunday night, 10 p.m., and didn't end until about 5 in the morning. I'd like to think that that was just a temporary once or twice. I came out the next morning, I spoke to Mike Sinacori, and I also placed calls to Dave and the city manager's office. I've done some dialogue with Dave, with Mike, and he's tried to adjust the schedule. It's still not working. It's still not very good. My wife has gone to her sister's. I have my child that I still take to school, and I've been trying to power through it. But I just have to point out the irony of, like, it's so good that we have, crime enforcement actions, but if we had a peace officer that did the wrong thing, truly they would be judged and pay the consequences. Here we have something that's quite a violation of typical code enforcement, yet the city is somehow kept to a standard that they're allowed to get past this. And I understand, for the greater good of the city, things need to happen, but there was no notice provided to me nor the neighbors. I understand there was something sent to the property management, but again, it just was really about a street closure and didn't really focus on the major fact that we're not going to be able to sleep, or at least it's going to be highly disturbed. Mike has continuously recommended that I move, and that my situation is that I'm actually temporarily in the house. I'm leasing to purchase it. He suggests that I don't pay my landlord, that they should have known, that my agent should have known. I'm not going to test those waters. I'm looking to engage my lease to purchase this, not to really provoke my landlord to not be satisfied. They didn't know either. Nobody knew. There's a few of us affected. I am at odds end to figure out a good solution, and subtracting Mike's suggestion that I go somewhere else and just not pay people, I really don't think that's an adequate solution. That's all I got. Thank you for hearing me out, and I may communicate more with the city.
Thank you. Any other comments on non-agenda or non-agenda items? Please come forward. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Harp.
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon. The City Council will adjourn to closed session to meet with the city's labor negotiators regarding negotiations with the Newport Beach Police Management Association, the Association of Newport Beach Ocean Lifeguards, as well as the city attorney. I'll be recusing myself regarding the city attorney agreement based on personal financial interest. Thank you.
Thank you. We're recessed until the 5:45 regular meeting. Calling the meeting to order for the February 22nd, 2022 regular City Council meeting. Sorry for the wait. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that Councilmember Duffield is present at a teleconferencing location pursuant to Government Code Section 54953B at 4346 Sunrise Drive, Eden, Utah. I will be conducting the roll call and all votes tonight verbally. Councilmember O'Neill has an excused absence. Councilmember Duffield?
Here?
Councilmember Dixon?
Here.
Councilmember Brenner?
Here.
Councilmember Avery?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Blom?
Present.
And Mayor Muldoon.
Present. Mr. Harp, is there a closed session report?
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon. There's no closed session report this evening.
Thank you. It's time for invocation by the Reverend Sadie Columber from Harbor Christian Church. Reverend?
I would just like to thank the City Council for giving us the opportunity to come and pray for you. Please pray with me. Holy God, we give thanks this evening for the opportunity to gather to do the business of our community. We give thanks for each council member who does the often thankless job of overseeing the needs and concerns of our diverse community. What a blessing to have so many gathered to serve and to do the tedious work of listening and deeply responding. We give thanks for the beauty and abundance in our community, and we recognize the great responsibility we have as people of abundance, the responsibility to first receive the blessing and then to recognize how we can turn the blessing outward onto others. God, today we ask for courage and strength in our leaders as they consider the many important issues in our community. As our council members discuss housing for those who are experiencing homelessness, we are reminded that your son also had no home. He relied on the hospitality and the generosity of others. We pray that we are a city of hospitality and generosity, and that as we house and care for those in need, we are serving you. God, our city council discusses public safety as we enter the third and long year of a global pandemic, and we're reminded that Jesus cared for the sick and the vulnerable, and we give thanks for the brave example he set to us. We pray for this strength in our leaders as they make hard calls, centering the vulnerable, the poor, the disabled, the immunocompromised. God, we are living in turbulent times, and there is so much confusion, so much anger and division, and our hearts break profoundly when we learn of hate crimes and propaganda being distributed in our own communities. Just this last week, we know, God, that this is especially heart-wrenching for you, who sent your Son to live and love and teach as a Jewish man, how it must devastate you to see the anti-Semitism in our own community. So God, today we lift up our individual and our collective hurts to you, knowing the love you have for each one of us and for our full community. Help us to reconcile our individual needs with the collective needs. Help us to hold one another as your Son Jesus has held us. Teach us to balance our abundance in sustainable ways, in just ways, and in ways that enable us to build your kingdom of love and justice for all. In the name of your Son, Jesus the Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
America.
republic for which it
To the
stands,
republic,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I am so impressed that our councilman in Utah, Duffy Duffield, was doing the pledge in his home as we were doing it here. Okay, Madam Clerk, notice to the public.
The City Council of Newport Beach welcomes and encourages community participation. Public comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per person to allow everyone to speak. Written comments are encouraged as well. The City Council has discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items.
Now is time for council announcements or reports from council members on committee activities and a time for council members to request an A1 item be placed on a future agenda. Councilmember Duffield, do you have any announcements or reports to make?
I have none.
Thank you. Councilmember Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think I have a slide to pull up on Town Hall for Council Districts 1 and 6. Councilmember Brenner and I will have a joint roadshow at the Civic Center Community Room on Thursday, a week from this Thursday, March 3rd, from 5 to 7. It will be the first in-person, at least for me, town hall in 2 years, I think. So I urge everyone who's interested. It does not have to be just the residents of Districts 1 and 6. It could be anyone who's interested in getting an update from on public safety, from community development and planning on development projects, harbor updates, homelessness, and our favorite subject, organics, recycling. And so please come one and all, an in-person town hall meeting. So look forward to that Thursday, March 3rd from 5 to 7 p.m. Councilmember Brenner and I had the distinct honor to meet with Girl Scout Troop 6365 last week when they had a tour of the Civic Center and City Hall, and spoke to both of us to encourage their future civic leadership. They were pursuing, or they are pursuing, their badge that's called Inside Your Government badge, and so we were pleased to allow them to talk to us and ask us tough questions. Short-term lodging, I want to take this opportunity. Is Simone here? If you want to come forward. Ms. Brenner and I had an update on short-term lodging and what's going on in the city as we get ready for the high season that will begin with spring break in a month. And so we talked to Mr. Georges, who's head of community development and planning, of how our recently enacted ordinances, plural, I guess, are taking effect. If you want to just comment on that, Simone, that would be great.
Certainly. Thank you, Councilmember Dixon. So our recent current short-term lodging ordinance was adopted back in August of 2020. And if the council recalls, you've imposed a cap of 1,550 permits all across the city. Currently, we have about 120 over that. These are permits that were already issued. So the city is not issuing any new permits. So right now, we have about 1,670 permits that are active. We do have a wait list. We have about 110 applicants on the wait list. And that, through attrition, those people on the wait list will eventually get a permit, but we will never go back above 1,550. Our code enforcement is a reactive program. It's done very well this last summer season. We do have a hotline. We are going to push out some messaging on social media, probably around the end of April, early May timeframe, so everybody understands the hotline. We do have a code enforcement officer that works till midnight, and that will be able to respond to any complaints. We've developed really strong relationships with the operators. A lot of the operators understand our new ordinance and are following through, and we think it's a successful program. And the operators are doing what they're supposed to do. They're taking care of their business. They're working with their tenants and controlling any of those complaints that do come forward.
And we have had some complaints. You want to just comment on that?
We do. We've had about, probably in the past year, over 600 complaints that have come in. I would say that the complaints have reduced over time. We've had a lot of complaints at the start of the process when we adopted the new ordinance, and it's just dropped off just because the operators are getting used to what we're looking for, what the ordinance is. We still have the hotline that is available, and we do have enforcement in case there is a complaint that comes in.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think
you.
it's just an update to the community is helpful as we get into the summer season. Also, a week from yesterday, Monday, February 28th, we will have a meeting of the Aviation Committee, also over in the community room at 5 p.m. in person. And I'm sure maybe we'll all be saying tonight, I just want to conclude with our deepest condolences to the family of Huntington Beach officer Nicholas Velo, responded to an incident in Newport Beach in the HB-1 helicopter, and I know the mayor will be speaking more on this later, but all of us have our heartfelt sympathies and the speedy recovery to the other officer who was in the helicopter, and it was a very difficult experience for all of us. Our Newport Beach Police, our Huntington Beach, and the sheriffs were involved, so just wanted to express my sympathies to the family. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Benner.
Yes, on the Girl Scouts that Diane and I met with, it was a fourth grade troop from Mariners Elementary School, and they were delightful and had interesting questions for us. On the short-term lodging meeting that we had with Simone, it was very interesting to see how this has progressed since we just conceptualized it a couple of years ago, and it seems to be working very effectively, and some of the operators are going above and beyond in having their own vans that respond to problems that their rentals are creating and taking care of them before they ever have to call the police or the hotline or whatever. So that's been a plus. I'd like to A1 a discussion for us to talk about the transferability of these licenses. We have some that are passed on from family to family, but we also have some companies that are getting these licenses. And so it would be nice if we could talk to council together and just talk about whether we like it the way it is or whether we would like to see some adjustment to it. It has created a separate asset class in our community where one home next door is worth more than the house next door to it. So anyway, so we'd like to request that that be an A1 item. And then we've got another meeting coming up on Thursday, March the 10th. This is our group residential use community update meeting. It will be on Thursday, March the 10th, 6 p.m. in the community room just across the way here. We will have city and county representatives, and I believe we will feature speakers from the State Department of Social Services, the agency that oversees the permitting of social rehabilitation homes. What we're finding now is it's not just sober living homes that we have in our community. We also have these social rehabilitation homes, which are for people with mental health issues that are also opening. and in some cases very close to other group homes. So it's something that our community has been very concerned about, and we were fortunate at our first meeting to bring representatives from the state, both our state senator, our state assemblywoman, our county supervisor, and our district attorney came to that meeting and was able to discuss all these issues with the community. And the community has been so helpful. They have done a lot of their own research. They've brought things to us that we didn't know about. And so they worked very collaboratively. They also met with Connie Petrie Norris last week, and she's chairing the oversight committee for these group homes. And so they felt like that was a productive meeting, and we feel like it's really all of us working together to solve a common problem. And we'd like to encourage anyone who is interested in that topic or also just interested in how the community and all the different levels of government can work together to solve problems in our community. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Avery. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
Thank you. We had a great Balboa Island meeting, and I want to thank the fire department for allowing us to have it at the fire station. It's always a lot of fun down there. And we got to talk about all the hot topics down on Balboa Island: benches, trees, and curbs. I know, so you guys missed a lot. But if you are interested in kind of the infrastructure and things, we do them about once a month down there, and they are great. You really get the feel of what Balboa Island is. It's a lot of fun. And then I also got to attend with our Newport Aquatic Center rowing team, the President's Day Regatta up in Long Beach, which was unbelievable. Newport took all the first places, so we have a hell of a rowing team right now. So just want to say it was great. Thank you.
That's great. Is your son on that team?
He is.
All right. Okay. I have one item for A1. Mayor Pro Tem Mike Posey of the City of Huntington Beach has asked his staff to work with our staff to determine L-associated logistics with the development of a memorial for Officer Nicholas Vela at or near the crash site. Furthermore, staff will inform Officer Vela's family regarding the proposed memorial and seek their input throughout the process to ensure that this is reflective of his life and his commitment to public safety. So I would like to agenda for A1 our cooperation with that movement. Madam Clerk, please read notice to the public regarding public comments on consent calendar.
This is the time in which council members may pull items from the consent calendar for discussion. Those are items 1 through 10. Public comments are also invited on consent calendar items. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record. If any item is removed from the consent calendar by a council member, members of the public are invited to speak on each item for up to 3 minutes per item. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. Council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the City Council votes on the motion unless members of the City Council request specific items to be discussed and are removed from the consent calendar for separate action.
Thank you. Council members, do you have any items to pull from consent calendar, items 1 through 10, or conflicts to announce? Councilman Duffield.
I have none.
Thank you. Councilmember Dixon.
I have none.
Councilman Brenner.
None.
Councilman Avery.
None.
Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
I have none.
And I have none as well. Do you have a motion?
I have a motion. With the modified minutes, I move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Second from Councilwoman Dixon. Now it's time for public comment on those consent calendar items number 1 through 10. Please come forward if you have anything. Okay. Seeing none, and Councilman Duffield back in Utah, do you have any comments on this consent motion?
No.
Okay, great. Seeing no request to speak from the dais either, let's vote.
I'll be doing the vote by roll call. Councilmember O'Neill is absent. Councilmember Duffield?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Dixon?
Yes.
Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Councilmember Avery?
Yes.
Councilmember Blum?
Yes.
And Mayor Muldoon?
Aye. Great, we're going for a record here. Any public comments on non-agenda items, please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council. My name is Jim Mosier. I had two non-agenda comments. The first is to reiterate something that I submitted to you in writing. As you may recall, at your last meeting, the city attorney had to caution two of the speakers for advocating how people should vote on a particular ballot measure. And my recommendation is, if that is indeed the policy of Newport Beach, that you don't want people doing that at the podium here, it would be very wise of you to amend your policy A1, which covers not just putting things on the agenda, but also the format of the non-agenda public comment, such as I'm making right now, so that that would be first clear that it is your policy, not just the city attorney's policy, and also so that it would be clear to everybody exactly what that policy is, so that they could follow it and be properly reprimanded if they don't. And the second comment I wanted to make is also about policy A1. And one of the provisions in that is a direction from you to the city clerk that our agenda packet be published by 4:30 p.m. on the Thursday before the council meeting. I read an article last week in Voice of OC mentioning that a council person in Laguna Beach, which has that same policy, was hoping that their city staff could prepare and post the agenda earlier than that, so that they and the public would have more time to know what's coming up on the agenda. I'm not recommending you do that because, as their staff pointed out, it's very difficult even to publish it on the Thursday before the meeting. However, in response, somebody from their staff mentioned that after their meetings, they post, and you can see it if you go Google Laguna Beach City Council agendas and minutes. You will see after the meeting, they publish something called a recap of the meeting, which is kind of an initial unedited minutes of what happened at the meeting. And at the end of that recap is a tentative schedule of all the council agenda items that the staff expects to be coming up at the next meeting and the meeting after that, and indeed for the entire calendar year coming up. I'm not recommending that you ask for a recap, but I do think that our city staff probably internally has a tentative agenda of what they're planning to put on the council meetings. I know the planning division presents a tentative agenda to the planning commission, and for a little while, a few years ago, our city manager did try to provide in the lobby and to the council members a tentative agenda. It would be very good if you could direct the staff in policy A1 to post not only the agenda on Thursday, but also to keep the public and you informed of their schedule of what they expect to come up at the future meetings. In other words, a tentative agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Patricia Ann Litton. In 1965, I purchased 120 26th Street in Newport Beach as an R2 property. The city of Newport Beach amended its general plan to change land use designations for this property to single-family detached R1 in 1989. I have been living here since 1965, and the city of Newport Beach did not grandfather my property into this change of designation in 1989. It is the city of Newport Beach's responsibility to correct property titles and advise the Orange County tax assessor of the change. An upstairs apartment was purchased in 1988 by Mr. Adrian Gooding, now Gudina, for which he has a grant deed. 2000, I changed my title to my trust, the Trust of Patricia Litton. By 2003, Mr. Gooding, now Gudina, decided with no proof that he was paying too much in property taxes. Since this time, I have been harassed, bullied by Mr. Gudina, both verbally and in writing regarding taxes and assessment fees owned by him. In 2017 and 2018, Mr. Gudina went to the Orange County Tax Assessor's office and paid the full amount due for both our properties and refused my check, stating he was suing me. 2019 and 2020, Mr. Gooding again refused to pay property taxes on the property. By 2021, he was still refusing to pay his portion of the property taxes and the special assessments charged on the tax bill for placing electrical wires underground. At 92 years young, I am still paying both property taxes and his, mine and his, as well as the special assessment fees. It is the responsibility of the city of Newport Beach to correct the property titles and grandfather my property into R1, the designation they made in 1989, thus correcting the Orange County tax assessor's record. Thank you for letting me present this.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Council members, Mr. Mayor, city staff, my name is Nicholas Earnhardt, an 8th grader at Ensign Intermediate and a young birder. And I am here today to engage the council on the subject of placing educational signage on the beach to help educate the public about sharing the shore with all wildlife. I moved to Orange County 6 months ago, and I saw the current treatment of shorebirds and wildlife on the beach, being chased by dogs, children, and adults. And I was, every time I visit, telling people what they were doing, and they were very receptive to the whole idea of education. And this got me thinking about the idea of the Audubon initiative, Share the Shore. And so there is, in related to the subject, a decaying sign about sharing the shore with the snowy plover and California least tern by the Balboa Pier. And it's asking people to help share the shore and reminding them that it's not just people at the beach. And what I propose is to help place signage on the beach to help educate the public on I'm not trying to keep them from going to the beach, but rather to help educate them on how to do so more responsibly. And so I have conducted a study in association with Sea and Sage Audubon Society, and I have started a petition, and we have over 200 signatures. And it is the duty of the City of Newport Beach, under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the California Migratory Bird Treaty Act, to protect these shorebird species. And so I propose that we can work together in the future to help place the signage and discuss funding and placement. Thank you.
Very good. The meeting will be short. You and I can speak after about that. And I believe to the resident who shared her lovely age, you had a chance to speak with staff, and I'm sure I'll be able to help you out. You're welcome. You look great for the age you said. I won't repeat your age.
I am 92 going on 93.
That's right. Okay, congratulations. That's great.
And I dance at school and plays ukulele.
That's great.
I have been in this city.
I'm sure of it.
When there were vacant lots.
Oh, definitely longer than me. Okay, staff, this is the only public hearing, I believe, correct? Okay. Yes, it is. Okay, Councilwoman Brenner is going to recuse herself for real property interest.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Simone Georges, Community Development Director, and with me is Principal Planner Jaime Murillo. This is just a recap of some changes we made to the ADU ordinance and went to the Coastal Commission, and it's coming back. Jaime has about 5 slides. We'll go through them very quickly for you and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Simone. Good evening, Mayor Muldoon, members of the council. As Simone mentioned, this is an amendment to both the zoning code and LCP amendment. Just provide a little bit of clarification. I know the council has reviewed a number of accessory dwelling unit amendments over the past few years. The first phase of ADU amendments was instigated by the state of California update in state law in 2017, where they mandated that cities allow for accessory dwelling units in conjunction with single-family residences. The city adopted those ordinances back in 2019. Then shortly after that, the state updated the state law regulations and adopted new regulations. And this is that second phase of amendments that we're currently working on. And that major change was to allow ADUs in conjunction with not only single-family residences, but also multi-family residences and mixed-use developments. And they further reduced the development barriers to the construction of ADUs. And staff began that process back in 2020, and the City Council actually adopted the update to Title 20, which is our zoning code, back in March of 2020. The council also authorized staff to submit the LCP amendment portion of that to the California Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission recently adopted the amendments back in December of 2021 with suggested modifications. So the amendments today would accept those modifications and update our LCP, which is in Title 21, as well as our zoning code, which is in Title 20 for consistency. But to avoid confusion, staff is also working on a third set of amendments, and this is to go above and beyond state law. And this is per the direction of Council Policy K4 and the recently adopted housing element. Within the housing element, there is a program to incentivize the development of ADUs, and that is to help address our regional housing needs obligation by the state. We are currently working on this third round of amendments with the Planning Commission. They've set up an ad hoc committee where we're looking at potential amendments to incentivize ADUs without, changing the community character or increasing bulk and mass significantly. So that's something we're working on. Did want to just point out we are scheduled to have a community workshop regarding that future phase of amendments on March 9th, 2022. So in 2 weeks, we'll be sending out a public hearing and e-select alert tomorrow with information on that. But quickly, just going back to the amendments that are before you today. As I mentioned, the Coastal Commission did adopt the changes with a few suggested modifications. The major ones are identified on the screen here. The first one is they wanted to clarify that the coastal resource protection policies and regulations that are in our LCP do prevail over any allowances under state law for accessory dwelling units. So, for example, under state law, a detached accessory dwelling unit can maintain a 4-foot setback, but not if that's within a canyon setback or a bluff development overlay. So coastal resource protections will always prevail over any of the standards under state law. They also want to make sure that any accessory dwelling units constructed within the shoreline are subject to hazards. When we do review and approve them, they have to show that they're safe from those future coastal hazards. So they have to show they're safe from flooding or future sea level rise. And then lastly, while we're going through the process with the Coastal Commission, we did receive a letter from the Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, who are reviewing our housing element. One of the comments we received on our housing element was that the HCD ADU team had reviewed our ADU ordinance and found that there were some areas that were out of compliance with that 2020 update. And so working with HCD and the Coastal Commission, they did adopt suggested modifications based on the corrections we received from HCD into the approval. And so what that would allow for is an ADU to be constructed with all multi-unit developments, not just existing developments, which we were previously under the impression that that's what the state law only allowed for, but also new construction. So for example, if someone wanted to construct a brand new duplex, they could construct an ADU as a component of that project. It also eliminates the maximum bedroom count that we had applied. So we still have maximum size limits, but we can't restrict the maximum number of bedrooms. And then lastly, there is a 800 square foot ADU exception. So even if a property is maxed out, let's say for floor area lot coverage, we still have to allow for at least an 800 square foot ADU. But there's a provision under state law that the maximum height limit for that special provision or exception is 16 feet. That was missing from our code, and so we're adding that. And so that's a summary of the suggested modifications made by the Coastal Commission. Overall, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we do have, the standards are pretty complicated depending on the type of ADU. So if it's attached or detached or built within a dwelling unit, there's different standards that apply. We have developed a matrix that's available on our website, which is www.newportbeachca.gov/ADU. There's a lot of information for the public and design communities related ADUs, including a very helpful matrix that clearly lists the standards that apply in the different ADU scenarios or types. And the one other thing I just wanted to point out is that major difference between the coastal zone and non-coastal zone is that under state law, someone can convert a garage and not replace parking, but that does not apply in the coastal zone. So the Coastal Commission did adopt a provision that says you have to replace any parking that's displaced in conjunction with the ADU conversion. Not clicking. Yeah, there you go. But that, in a summary, is the changes that are before you today. The ordinances before you would ask that you accept the Coastal Commission's suggested modifications and adopt the LCP amendment. And we also would revise the Title 20 or zoning code regulations to match those in the LCP. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Councilwoman Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. A quick question back to the previous slide. When you have all these updated, flexible provisions, Ms. Brenner has asked this question a lot, but I get this question too. What about non-permitted garage or granny flat type structures? Are they part of your flexible conversion provision?
Yes, definitely. So it does help with a lot of the non-permitted units that may be out there. So as you can see on the slide, the internal category, that would cover perhaps someone who subdivided a duplex and turned an extra master bedroom to a third unit. That internal category would then allow for that to be legally permitted. So it does help.
And one more question. How many applications for ADU permits do we have pending?
I have a slide.
Oh, you have a slide?
Yeah, I can get to it.
You thought you'd be asked this question, right?
There we go.
There, 97.
So on that website I did share, there is an ADU tracker. So we track it in real time, and it actually shows the location of ADUs, the type of ADUs. I cannot read that, actually. So pending, I can't read the one in red. On the upper right-hand.
19? Does that say 19?
19, yes. So that's pending. We have 15 that are final. Final means they're actually constructed and in place. And then, wow, I think it's 40.
63, 15, and 19.
Oh, 63.
Is this all since how long? In what period of time?
Since the changes in 2017.
Really? All right. We're inching along. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me. Do they offset our affordable housing? Does that apply to our? Let me put on the mic. Does that apply to our affordable housing 49?
Yes. So, and any ADU that's finalized after June 30th of 2021 would count towards this next planning period and towards our RENA.
Great. Any public comments on this item? Please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name again is Jim Mosier. First of all, Jaime mentioned going above and beyond the law. One of the features, according to this matrix, has to do with whether ADUs can be sold separately, separate conveyance. The council has chosen to prohibit that in Newport Beach. But I wanted to point out to you that on page 11-57 of the law, you will see there is a bill that does allow a council, apparently it's voluntary, to permit separate conveyance in connection with nonprofit organizations, and that bill has actually been since amended. And I understand that's actually to benefit organizations like Habitat for Humanity to make their business model possible. And so I'm wondering if we are consciously not wanting to offer that option to nonprofits in Newport Beach, because apparently we're not at the present time. And as to all these pages that you have of the existing law, you will notice on page 11-39 at the start of it, it's a very lot of laws. This is a printout effective January 1st, 2020. There have, of course, been new laws that came into effect on January 1st, 2021, and still more on January 1st, 2022. So like everything that the state has to do with housing, this is very much a moving target and very difficult, I'm sure, for our staff to cope with. Was mentioned in the staff report, we got a letter, apparently unsolicited, from HCD, or actually there's an email chain in the staff report about this. What you introduced tonight and adopted 2 weeks from now, the staff is actually required to send that to HCD, much like the housing element, for a compliance review, and they can require you to amend it if they don't find it in compliance. So effectively, it has to be certified. And one of the things that clearly will not be certified is our provision. If you look at look at the email chain on page 115, what the HCD calls item 8 has to do with whether you're allowed 1 or 2. It has to do with how junior accessory dwelling units are allowed on the same property with a standard accessory dwelling unit. The law has been changed, as they tried to point out to us, and our staff didn't quite understand their comment. And our current provision, which you'll find on the matrix, it says a JADU is allowed only in combination with a detached new construction single ADU. That's no longer the law. We have to allow both on each lot. So there is that matter will be found, I'm sure, in non-compliance and will need a future amendment. But that's the way it goes with state housing law, constantly changing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? Yes.
Excuse me. Council members, I have a question regarding the limitation on how many persons are allowed in these units. We have people now, you can have 8, 10 people living in a garage. How are we going to control the amount of people in these units? That's my question.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? See, now, could you give a quick answer to that, Simone? Just occupancy levels.
Yeah, so the building code actually dictates the number of occupants in a dwelling unit or an ADU. We really don't get any complaints about overcrowding in these ADUs or dwelling units, so we haven't really come across it. But if we do, we would have to do a head count and do enforcement.
Very good, thank you. Any comments from Utah? All right, hearing none, the public comment section is now complete, and I don't see any questions from the dais. Is there a motion on this item? Thanks, Duffy. Go ahead.
I'll make a second. I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Blom, seconded by Councilwoman Dixon. Let's vote.
Prior to the roll call vote, I'll read the ordinance titles for Ordinance 2022-5, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach adopting revisions to Zoning Code Amendment CA 2019-9, amending Title 20, Planning and Zoning of the City of Newport Beach Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units for consistency with the California Coastal Commission's modifications and state law, and Ordinance 2022-6, accepting California Coastal Commission's suggested modifications and adopting Local Coastal Program Amendment LC 2019-8 to amend Title 21, Local Coastal Program Implementation Plan of Newport Beach Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units. Councilmember O'Neill is absent. Councilmember Duffield.
Aye.
Councilmember Dixon.
Aye.
Councilmember Brenner. Oh, I'm sorry, she recused herself. Councilmember Avery.
Abstain.
Councilmember Blom.
Aye.
And Councilmember Muldoon.
Aye.
With that, the motion carries 5-0-1 with Councilmember Brenner abstaining, or recusing herself. Oh, goodness gracious, my apologies. And Councilmember Avery abstaining.
Great, thank you. Madam Clerk, please read the announcements for the motion for reconsideration.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the city council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Any motions? Seeing none, we're going to adjourn in memory of Officer Nicholas Epperly, pronounced Vela. Tonight we adjourn in memory of Huntington Beach Police Officer Nicholas Vela, a brave public servant who lost his life in a tragic helicopter accident while responding to a call on Newport Beach on Saturday evening. Officer Vela was a 14-year veteran of the Huntington Beach Police Department and regularly patrolled the skies over Newport Beach like our very own guardian angel. He watched over our police officers as they worked and our residents as they slept. We do not know yet the cause of the crash, which is being investigated by the National Transportation Safety Board. Thankfully, Officer Vela's pilot partner survived the accident and is recovering. Officer Vela is survived by his wife and teenage daughter. If anyone would like to donate to support his family, please go to porac.org. Our prayers are with his family, friends, and colleagues during this very difficult time. We adjourn tonight's City Council meeting in memory of Officer Nicholas Vela.